Hello, and once again, welcome to the program, Your Local Government. I'm Bob Miller with Blue Ridge Communications, and this is the program that focuses on government issues. Of course, everyone knows we have an election coming up in November, and for the 99th District, Representative Zimmerman will be facing off against the Democratic opponent, YTYLG470DuaneGroff. And Duane, thank you for being with us. Your first time on the program, so I'm sure the folks are anxious to get to know a little bit about you.
Well, thank you, Bob. Thank you for having me here this afternoon.
Okay, we'd like to learn a little bit about you. So we spoke before the show that your family has been here for a long time. So why don't we start with that part of your heritage here in Lancaster County?
Certainly. My family, the Groff family, has been here in Lancaster County for somewhere around 14 or 15 generations. Back in the early 1700s, we came over. The original settler was a man named Hans Groff, and he settled in the Paradise area. And here we are 14, 15 generations later, still strong in Pequea Valley area.
Yes. Okay, and you are from the Gap region.
That is correct. I come from, I was actually born and raised in Paradise, married my wife Tammy in 1998 and moved to Gap. Mm-hmm. And that's where I am today.
Okay, let's go through your education. What education have you had?
My education is, I'm going to say sparse, Bob. I am a high school graduate of Pequea Valley. That is where my formal education ends. Mm-hmm. I've had lots of life experience, but no more formal schooling than that.
Okay, sort of like the PhD from the School of Hard Knocks.
That is correct.
Okay, let's talk about work history. Tell us about what you've done in your career.
I have been in the food service industry for, ever since I graduated high school, which was back in 1988. Mm-hmm. I was a baker for Kitchen Kettle Village in Intercourse for about 14 years. After that, I was in Wise Market as a bakery supervisor. I then moved to Burdenhand Bakery as a production manager, and currently I'm working for Dutch Valley Foods in New Holland in their food service division there.
Okay. We spoke earlier that you were always involved in or interested in politics. Share that story, how as a child you were fascinated.
Bob, I have always loved politics, and I know that sounds a little silly, but I can remember being a small child and being interested particularly on presidential election nights when they'd show that map and they'd show the states going to this candidate or that candidate, and it was something that had interested me then, and mm-hmm. It is something that is exciting for me today to be involved in politics as an actual candidate. Bob, here, just a quick, interesting story for me here, and maybe for our viewers too. When I was in third grade, our field trip that year was to the State Museum in Harrisburg. Mm-hmm. When our tour of the museum was over, we had a few extra minutes, so the teachers had taken us across the street to the Capitol building and walked us around the rotunda area. Mm-hmm. And I remember as a kid walking around and just looking up at the lamps and the staircase and everything and thinking, I could work here one mm-hmm. day. And perhaps in January, I'm actually going to fulfill that dream.
Okay, let's talk about your political aspirations. Any involvement with the Democratic Committee of Lancaster County? Have you been on any township supervisors or any other previous political experience?
Actually, Bob, I am a new Democrat. Mm-hmm. I became a Democrat in January so that I could challenge Representative Zimmerman here in the fall. Mm-hmm. I had been a Republican since the first time that I could vote, which was the presidential election in 1988. Mm-hmm. During those years, I also served as a Republican committee person for about 5 or maybe 6 years. Mm-hmm.
So you do have some experience in that political involvement. What got you interested in switching to Democratic? I'm sure the viewers are wondering. Particularly, heritage-wise, traditionally Republican. What got you interested in switching parties?
I found myself becoming less and less enamored by Republican policies, and particularly when we were watching the presidential debates here in the last year or so, mm-hmm. as we were winnowing that field down farther and farther, and it looked more and more and more like we were going to have Donald Trump as the candidate, I became part of the Never Trump group of people, and in the 99th, there were no Democrats who were running against David Zimmerman. There was absolutely no interest. And as I said, I'd always had an interest in running for a political office. And I felt this was my opportunity. So I took that opportunity to the Democrats downtown, and I talked with the chairperson and the chairperson for the committee campaigns. And they vetted me out, and they were more than willing to endorse my campaign so long as I was willing to switch parties.
Okay. We mentioned the importance to be focusing on policies, and we're going to now switch to that if we can. As you know, one of the challenges facing Pennsylvania is funding the PESERs, the state pension for the teachers. Many years ago, what happened is they decided to increase the payout significantly, assuming that the stock market would do well. The stock market crashed. School districts are being faced with enormous increases to fund PESERs because of the increases, and it's been kicked down the road for a long time, and we're reaching a point it's becoming critical. So something has to be done. I mean, we're either going to have to raise taxes considerably, make some kind of a switch to a defined contribution rather than a defined benefit. Something's going to have to happen. So what is your position on this as to what we can do to solve this crisis before it explodes on us?
Well, Bob, I think it's already exploded on us. We're at a situation, like you said, that school districts are faced with contributions that don't fit their budgets very well. We are forced to pay into the system almost more than we are actually educating the students who it benefits. And you said about how we've kicked the can down the road a couple times. We've also had times back in late 80s, early 90s, again, when the stock market was going just great year after year. Our legislature also took holidays from paying into PESERs because they were the stock market was funding the PESERs on its own. So we could use that money for other situations, other line items in the budget. And like you said, here we are now in 2016 at a critical point. And nobody's going to like to hear this, but I think we're at a point that I think we're going to have to basically put a freeze on the pensions and basically, like you said, turn it into a contribution, almost like a 401k package. Unfortunately, there are few businesses, corporations today that even offer a pension.
Right.
And if you're fortunate enough to get into the PESERS program, you are well blessed. But unfortunately, I just feel as though we have come to the point that the whole system needs revamped.
Yes.
I spent days looking at numbers for this, and to be honest with you, I admire anybody who understands all of the actuary tables and the numbers that come out of this, because it's a disaster waiting to happen, and hopefully we'd like to close that up soon.
Absolutely. Okay, it's time for a break. We'll be right back after these few words. Stay with us. And welcome back to the program, Your Local Government. Our guest today is DuaneGroff, who's running for the 99th District. We're running against Representative Zimmerman. And Duane, thank you again for being with us. One of the things that's quite concerning in Pennsylvania is the increasing drug use, particularly heroin, once again, something we heard about a long time ago. No easy answers. What do you think are some things we could be doing to help slow down this epidemic?
Slow down the epidemic. Bob, I'm not sure how we slow down the epidemic. I think this is just another chapter in the war on drugs that we have seen since Nancy Reagan's time back in the 80s. Again, I think it's education. I think we don't do a good enough job educating our students as to what they need to stay away from, and adults as well, because there's too many people, too many adults who get tangled up in this that are then forced to either seek rehab, or should the worst happen, they need naloxone to try and bring them back out of an overdose. And currently we also have too many people who are laying in coroner's offices because they've reached the end. And I, to be honest with you, Bob, I don't know what the answer there is.
Okay, but you do recognize it as a serious problem that we have to do something.
It's a disaster. Again, my mother, her best friend, she lost her grandson about 2 weeks ago to an overdose. And, you know, there's a situation where this family doesn't have their son anymore. And what could have prevented that? I don't know. He had a bright future ahead of him, and we just need to try and, like I said, I don't know how to work through this.
Okay, fair enough. Let's talk about fracking. Fracking has become controversial. Clearly, there's a need for the United States to be energy independent because we're too dependent upon foreign nations that could pull the plug on us. Fracking has brought a lot of industry and money to Pennsylvania. It's created jobs. There's a lot of tax revenue that's coming from it. On the other hand, there's concern about what it could possibly do to the environment. And I guess from a legislative standpoint, the whole question becomes, you know, what is your policy on taxing? Keep it where it is, increase the taxing on them, because the dilemma is that oil prices are falling throughout the world. It's now getting more difficult to be profitable, so fracking may not provide the growth that it once did. And so where are you weighing in on fracking as to how friendly or unfriendly we should be to it and how we should be taxing it?
I am not very friendly to the fracking industry. I feel bad for the state of Pennsylvania because I think there are a lot of extraction taxes that have been lost over the 7, 8, 9 years that we've had fracking in Pennsylvania now. We also have a situation where the state has over 5,000 miles of pipelines that run back and forth and helter-skelter throughout the state, and there is no kind of a transmissions fee or any kind of a fee on energy providers who are using our land in that way either. I think there's a lot of money there. I think it's an untapped resource that we could use for whether it would be helping out with the Peasers situation or maybe better rehabilitation centers for drug addicts. There's just a lot of lost money there that we are not accessing.
Let's move on to the Syrian refugee crisis. I mean, clearly a catastrophic event for the Syrians. Many of them are looking for a place to go. You know, as you said, your family came here probably in the 1700s to get away from religious persecution, and they wanted a good life. There are those who are in favor of bringing them in because that's what America does. However, there's concern that ISIS or other groups might be infiltrating it and putting terrorists in. And then there's the question of acclimation. Will they be acclimating themselves or, you know, becoming a separate subunit that actually, you know, can pose a security risk? So it's a tough question as to how to go about it, and emotions run high on both sides. The current governor has been quite in favor of allowing as many refugees to come in, and there are those who are concerned that are we going to have safety if we have those in who have sometimes violent tendencies. I'm sure it's a very small amount of them, but there is a group of them that think that if they don't share your religious beliefs, they have the right to inflict damage upon you, which wasn't part of your ancestors when they came here. They just wanted to be left alone. So where are you weighing in on, you know, how welcoming versus how cautious we should be in allowing refugees, particularly from some of those countries, to come in?
Well, Bob, here in my situation, I do not necessarily embrace everything that Governor Wolf endorses, but the Syrian refugees, I absolutely embrace 100% with him. I think we need to be a nation, a state that is welcoming to the refugees. The Syrians who are coming here from that part of the world go through a rigorous, like 10 or 12 point reference vetting process. Thank you. Yes, that they need to go through before they will be admitted into our country, and there are deadlines that they need to meet on their calendar before they get here. And if they don't meet the deadline, they have to start back at the beginning to reapply for amnesty to come here. These are people who are desperate for a better way of life. I think we have bigger issues with terroristic people who are coming in on either student visas or work visas, where those requirements are much less stringent for their arrival into the country.
Yes. Okay, we're going to take a break. We'll come back for the final segment. We'll be talking about quite a bit more. Stay with us. We'll be right back after these few words. And welcome back to the final segment of Your Local Government. We have with us DuaneGroff, who is running for the Pennsylvania House off of the 99th District. He'll be facing off against Representative Zimmerman. One of the things that's of concern is jobs. Many people are leaving Pennsylvania because they can't find good jobs. There's a drain of youth as they're looking for places of opportunity, and clearly some policies do have an impact on job growth. So have you looked at policies you think we need to implement that would ensure jobs for the future, that want to keep the youth here and provides a middle-class income?
Bob, there's a lot of opportunities here in the state of Pennsylvania. First and foremost, we need to make sure that our kids are getting a full education, meaning that they're going to college, getting a full 4-year degree for whatever field it is. And again, there are great jobs out there. There are jobs in the healthcare sector. There are good jobs in STEM areas with science, technology, engineering, and math. All kinds of pharmaceutical kind of jobs here in the state. We also have the opportunity for computer engineering kind of jobs. As I think as long as kids are getting a good education, those jobs will be here for them. I know it's a time where a lot of kids are leaving, and unfortunately, at least here in Lancaster County, one of the problems we have is a lot of jobs are centered in the tourist sector, and those are not high-paying jobs. Like I said at the beginning, I worked for 14 years for Kitchen Kettle. It was a great job, and I learned a lot about quality and procedures and how to handle yourself. But those kind of tourist jobs are not conducive to raising a family in. So if kids are not taking the initiative or the incentive to go to college, they're not going to get the good paying jobs. So get yourself an education, and
there you go.
Things will fall together.
I want to get into the issues that you've identified as things that are important to you. One being preserving Lancaster County's farmland. Just briefly, what's your thoughts on that?
We have so much beautiful, beautiful Lancaster County farmland that is not preserved. And I don't know that it needs preserved as in the Lancaster County official.
Yes. There's two organizations that do that. Yeah.
Right. And I think those organizations are incredibly important to the community. But we need to also make sure that we are balancing growth within the county. I think we have a lot of growth currently going on, so we need to be very careful that we don't overtax our farmland and lose too much of it, because that's one of the resources that people come here for, the experience of it.
Absolutely. Now let's go on to an interesting position, lowering or eliminating property taxes. So that's great, but that means the funding has to come from somewhere else. So what is your thoughts on where that somewhere else is?
Well, we have an opportunity here where I'm not sure that we are going to be able to lower or eliminate property taxes, but what I would love to see happen is a family who has no more children in school, no more school-aged children, and I'm saying like by 10 years out of school, I think their property taxes should be frozen at that point, because those people are now at the point of their lives that they are either at or near retirement age, and they are going to become dependent on a fixed income. And particularly for those families who are no longer using the school system for students, I think they should have a frozen tax base for the school districts.
Interesting concept. Did you come up with that on your own, or is that
I did.
Very innovative. Now let's talk about reducing the size of Pennsylvania's legislature. What size do you think it should be?
I think we should go down by at least a third. We have 204 representatives and 53 senators. I would love to see that down around 150 and maybe 35 or 40.
And simply from a cost saving or efficiency, or what is your thoughts?
Well, Bob, last year we had a 9-month budget impasse. We have 250 some odd legislators up there that couldn't get the job done. If 250 couldn't do it, let's take a few out of that mix,
Okay.
because we needed a budget last year.
Sure, and that's one of the other points. Passing a state budget in a timely fashion, that was somewhat disgraceful the way it took so long, and how that created a problem. What would you say would not make that happen again? I mean, this last one was okay because I think the political pressure would have been too hard, but what can we do to avert that in the future?
Well, one of the points that I would love to have made is the fact that legislatures would not get paid until a budget is passed. Now, I don't mean that they would get paid retroactively. I think they should be forfeiting their pay until they get a budget passed. I would not want that pressure on me and my family, and I think legislators would get a budget passed that would make sense that way.
Sure, I think that was originally proposed by Senator Brubaker.
Correct.
So you must have liked that idea when you heard it from him. Yes. Okay. You're out talking to people. You said you're enjoying talking to some folks, and what are you hearing from them? What is their biggest concerns about Pennsylvania?
Well, for Pennsylvania, again, going back to taxes, they think that the property taxes are too high. And to be honest with you, if you look around at other states, we are a mid to lower taxed state with property taxes, but it still impacts every family. And like I said, if we could freeze that for seniors or find a way to reduce it a little bit, because our state funds education at the 45th worst rate in the nation. If we could increase that and I think it's amazing, if we could increase that $300 million per year, we would still be the 45th worst funding education.
Funding education, yes.
And if you would add that kind of money to the base for the schools, maybe we wouldn't see so much in property taxes.
Okay, so clearly property tax reform would be on the top of your list. Have you taken any positions on whether that would be sales taxes or more income tax to close that loop? Have you weighed in on any of those at all?
I have not, Bob.
Okay, all right. What else are you hearing from your constituents? What are their frustrations?
Well, I don't know if it's a frustration, but lots of people are concerned about having their guns, making sure that they are not going to lose their Second Amendment rights. I have no intentions of anybody losing any kind of Second Amendment rights. I think that's incredibly important. You as a journalist would probably, and again, I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but for people who feel as though Second Amendment rights should be curtailed some, my question to those people is, if we eliminate or make the Second Amendment tougher for people to get guns, how does that happen if we take that away from people and our government then starts to encroach on other rights that we have?
Yes.
Who is there to protect those rights?
Sure. So you're in somewhat disagreement with some of the national Democratic policies?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So you don't line up completely with all of the policies. Okay, we've got a minute. If you would, tell us your website and then why the voters should vote for you.
Well, my website is www.groff2016.org. I also have a Facebook page and a Twitter account, so please take a look at both of those. Why should you vote for me? I think you should vote for me because I am willing to help change Pennsylvania for the better. I want to help our constituents here in the state with property tax relief. I want to help people have a better life here in Pennsylvania. So we just want to rise up and go the way.
Okay. Well, Duane, best of luck. If you do win, I hope you'll come back and give us updates.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate the time here today.
All right, that's going to do it for this program. Join us again next time to learn about your local government.